Misanthrope's lecture and analysis.
Kit in the Mystic Forest, Act 3, Mother and Family, Part 47, Kit's Letter. On the outskirts of a town, in a house atop a hill, eyes did open. The cure had worked, and 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐿𝐼, fourth in a line, was alive again in a splendid womanly form. A form, by the way, that was not at all surprisingly starved. She looked and searched and scratched her head. There were a great number of things amiss. Her short hair disheveled, her body unclothed, her food pantry empty, her humble abode shabby, and worst of all, her beloved family missing. And not only that, but a very distinctive ominous feeling hung in the air. She need not wonder. She knew. Her brows knit as she thought. What had happened? She had been sick, that much was known, but the extent and time were details unknown. Though through a brief inspection of her abode, a letter was produced. One addressed to her from her sweet little daughter, Kit. The letter filled in gaps brought on by lost time. The words on the page told a horrible story, yet one also imbued with love. And without a moment's delay, Lorelei Woods, formerly 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐿𝐼 IV, made her way to the forest, though first she dressed. Part 48, The Legend 5, A Woman in the Forest. Lorelei Woods, fourth daughter of his wife, furthest removed from her fairy blood, was not entirely unfamiliar with the forest, both sacred and feared. She knew of his power and of his secrets. Yes, she knew this place very well. For when she was younger, still a lass in her homeland, she read books about this very place. The forest, those books told, acted as a sort of bridge between the worlds temporal and ethereal. A nexus, if one would, of many worlds both seen and unseen. She knew this place well, for when last she was here, a great loss did she suffer, fooled by her meager power and vainglorious mind. She had sullied the name of her mother's. She had sullied the name of his wife. Yes, she knew this place very well. She breathed in deeply and took for the first time in a long, very long time, her first steps back into that very forest. She exhaled. As she hiked through the forest, she could see that this place had changed very much since last she was here. She could think on that later, she thought, for her first goal was finding Kit, and for that, she would find herself once again asking an old Solomon tree for help, of which she was much obliged to do. Part 49, The Power of His Wife and His Wife. Solomon would help Lorelei, but the true task would fall on her. For like her, his power too was greatly weakened a long time ago. Solomon's power, a permission from the forest, the crisscrossing network of roots beneath, would be paired together with the weakened, though still great arcane, of 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐼 IV to pinpoint a scared little girl, a one Kit Woods. With all of Solomon's power at her command, she could see in her mind nearly half the forest as whole. She could see a small cave, entrance hidden by tall leaves. She could see the girl we've come to know as Kit, curled in a small, tight ball. Immediately Lorelei left and quickly found the spot. She uncovered the protective leaves, and just as she had seen, there was her wonderful little girl. Lorelei gave a gentle call. Kit, I'm here. And when the girl saw the face of who was calling, she crawled out of the cave and held her mother tight. The moment was nice, and in it a promise was made. Kit would be free of the forest's cruel hold. Part 50, Special Secrets. With mother and daughter reunited, the next task on Lorelai's mind was finding her man, her beloved Bailey of the Woods. She had read in the letter, the one from Kit, that he was cold and in the ground, heart-eaten and dead. But Lorelai had a secret for Kit, a special secret, one she'll likely enjoy. Her father, a golem, could be saved, for only his body was lost. His soul, however, still lingered in this place. Kit needed only show her the way. Part 51, Family Reunion. The place that Kit led her mother was more terrifying than Lorelai imagined, though she kept her wits about. Where Bailey had fallen was not a simple pit, but a specifically made prison to ensnare a golem. Though her arcane was strong, even Lorelai Eisweirth, fourth of a kind, would need a little help. And it just so happened that the partial fairy girl Kit was all too happy to be that help. Kit's grasp of the new arcane was quick. Soon, mother and daughter were working in perfect union, pulling Bailey's soul to the surface, freeing it from its tomb. A new body would be needed, though making one from scratch would be a tough task. However, the young and resourceful Kit had a plan. She suggested the stones and rocks that littered the ground still here from the excavation. The idea was good, not perfect, but it worked. The family was reunited, a trio again. Part 52, The Legend 6, Odyl's Colloquy. The three held off their celebration, as there was much to discuss and many problems to amend. Bonded to the forest still were the father and child, Bailey and Kit Woods. Then there was the town and the old mayor, and the book that he carried, which, as Bailey told, was quite similar to the one of words. Lorelai took over. She had a story to tell. A story that began like this, red with gold. Colloquy was his name. A book written in proof by its co-author, the spirit Odyl. An old world spirit, it once flowed freely with his brothers and sisters, between the worlds ethereal and temporal. As a spirit of nature, Odyl drew people and spirits and animals and plants, and even places together, in all sorts of combinations, omnium gatherum. It would even revitalize their souls, even the souls of the worlds themselves. But one day, Odyl became separated from his brethren, lost within another ethereal world. It had somehow wandered into this strange land and became trapped. And over time, over a great long time, Odyl grew very different from his former self, from the other spirits, and in fact, from anything else. So different was Odyl, so different it had become, that when it finally found its escape, the worlds outside burned it. There was nowhere for the spirit to exist, nowhere except that ethereal island that had become its home. But wait, there's more. The second author was her, this woman named Lorelai. Her story continued in the time of her youth, in a place far, far away. Naturally gifted in the arcane this girl was. More so than her mother's, more so than any. She could sense the world around her with almost painful clarity. Temporal, ethereal, she could see their harmony. She could feel their dissonance. Such power made her arrogant. She believed she could do it all. So one night, alone, against her mother's wishes, she would leave for the forest, the source of nature's imbalance. In the forest she found it, the spirit Odyl. To any who took notice, to those who could see, the change in Odyl was obvious. No longer was this the spirit of nature, but a cunning deceiver, a trickster with a plan to create a text that could bind her mighty arcane with its twisted power. A book designed to rewrite the nature of the world so that it could exist. Perhaps it was her youth. Perhaps it was just a heart too kind. But she agreed to craft this reality-bending book. The book, Colloquy. She thought she could do it all. But this woman, she was a fool. Lorelei became silent for a moment before saying, That day I lost my name. Kit and Bailey waited for more, but her story was done. The old legend was complete. Lorelei told them they must find the old mayor, stop him, and destroy the book. Part 53, To All Who Took Notice. The atmosphere hung heavy with the imbalance. The sun seemed further away and sparsely as bright. Life and color seemed drained from the animals and plants and other forest things that mountains are. Evident to those who looked, to all who took notice, the world was already changing. The air itself even tasted different, went in and left out strangely, like soon it would not even belong. Time was running out, and it was clear that their leads had run dry. Perhaps the Book of Words could help locate an old mayor, but would it be quick enough? The family did wonder. That's when the girl Kit remembered an odd glowing man with an even odder book. There was no doubt in their minds. The altar was their next destination. There, they would find Odyl and his pawn. Part 54, Witness 1, The Body of Odyl. And there, in the shining altar, he was, standing tall, standing triumphant. But was it true? Was it really the old mayor who stood before the three? No, not truly. For before them stood a man possessed. Before them stood Odyl. Azure his eyes became, as his shadow crept up the walls, taking on a large and human shape. Steps were taken forward as others retreated back. Lights flickered under the distress as a tangled message was relayed. The fault is not our own, but yours, Bailey of the Woods. Abomination of the forest. My dearest Lorelei, I'm so glad to see you again. Your light harkens the calamity's return. I will need your arcane once more. So you must die, so the town can be saved. Witness the coming of a new world. My world. So prophesizes the book, Colloquy. Part 55, Witness 2, A World Unprepared. Thaddeus Johannson, temporal body of Odyl, read from the Colloquy, and the walls of the altar crumbled before all. He read once more, and the skies darkened, and the sun reddened. The world screamed in agony as it became warped in Odyl's eye. It had started. The new world was here, and the old world was fading away. Kit, told to hide, ran to safety far on the outskirts of the newly made battlefield. and through parted bushes she saw her parents engage the body of Odyl in battle. However, it was all over in what seemed like the blink of an eye, his eye. With a touch and a glance, both mother and father were frozen in time. It was talking to the old mare's body, talking to her parents, but she was too far away to make any of it out, any except for a single word: witness. Witness? Witness what, she wondered, before taking notice of the terrifying ongoings round her. The winds raged, the trees arched and cracked, the grass turned to ash, and that creepy shadow lurking behind the old mare grew larger and larger, and seemed more tangible than before. She, this girl named 𝐻𝐤𝐤𝐞, wondered, is this what we are to witness? Then Odyl turned to her. Frightened and confused, she wanted to run, but she didn't want to leave her mother and father. It started towards her. She hesitated too long, and it was too late. Odyl, or at least his temporal form, was there. It touched the girl upon the head, peered deeply into her soul, and said to her, "Witness, 𝐻𝐤𝐤𝐞. Witness the loss of your family." Frozen like her parents, the girl stood entranced by Odyl's spell, locked within her mind, in a dreamscape all her own. She, 𝐻𝐻, saw her mother. She saw her lying sick in their bed, transforming into something that was less than human. She also saw her father, trapped in the ground, ripped and torn and sad. She saw herself alone in a cave, rolling into a tight little ball. She saw all of her recent unhappy memories, every one. She could feel Odyl trying to bring her down, whispering ill in her ear. But strangely, she didn't feel sad or unhappy, or any other depressing emotions. It was because when she looked just beyond those moments, what she saw was a father sacrificing everything for his girls, a mother rescuing her daughter and husband, and a daughter doing anything she could to reunite her lost family. What she saw was love, and just like that, the dream was over. 𝐻𝐻 had escaped. Odyl was shocked, but not moved by 𝐻𝐻's resolve. Its words were code. This part fairy girl, daughter of an Eisweirth, offspring of an abomination, little and small, would not succeed because she could not succeed. She would fail and become lost, just like her parents, just like this man, just like this forest, just like the town, just like everyone. And that, 𝐻𝐻 thought, was it. She was 4 foot in 𝐻𝐤𝐤 and had had it up to 8 foot too. The girl placed her hands on the body of Odyl's temporal form and gave it a good shove, and while the body barely budged, it felt good. Very good. So good, in fact, that she kept pushing. She screamed in a voice that boomed, "I won't witness the loss of my family because I won't lose my family." Still, its body barely budged, so she dug her little feet into the ground and pushed harder. "Witness your own mistakes, your own failures, and leave us alone." Still, its body barely budged, but she was doggedly focused. She would move that body. She flashed the old mare her fiercest pout, took a big breath, and exhaled it from her nose. She gave it everything she had. "Witness yourself." The body of Odyl was moved, pushed back and on the ground. The spell lifted and her parents freed. The poor girl couldn't check to affirm this, for you see, the whole of her tiny being shook and trembled with fright and relief. She continued until her mother and father laid a hand upon her shoulders, one on either side. The three watched as Odyl's shadow separated from the old mare's now lame body and dissipated into the air, leaving the world with only this.
I was lost, and no one searched. I became free, found myself needed. I was truly lost.
Part 56, Witness 3, A Prayer for Johannson. The old mare, now free of Odyl, lied on the ground with tears in eyes. Unmoving was his body, soon soul would leave flesh. He talked to all who would hear, but mainly for himself. He said he only wanted to protect his home, but now his home was lost. And with that, the last light faded from his eyes. Lorelei said a small prayer for him, while Kit clung to her father's sturdy leg. Bailey's eyes, ever hard to read, only stared. Lorelei closed his eyes, then took the Colloquy and burnt it in her hand. The spell and Odyl were gone, but the balance of the world temporal was damaged, and though it could be and would be mended, the task would neither be easy nor quick. For now, though, other issues were on Lorelei's mind. While she was free to leave this place, her family was not. Part 57, Love 3, The Spirit of Sacrifice. The three, mother, father, and daughter, made their way back to the entrance of the forest. Awaiting them were the duo of animal-faced apparitions that the little one called Kit had met before. Their speech was dry and message clear. The woman could pass, but the golem and child must stay. Lorelei, completely aware of their stance, announced her title and demanded to speak to 𝐋𝐤𝐤𝐞, spirit of the forest. And it came. A large, bulbous, semi-transparent yellow creature. Odd red and sky blue markings ran round its body. Leaves covered its backside like hair. Though seemingly imposing, its aura was quite inviting. And though its voice echoed loudly, it was as soothing as an autumn breeze. Lorelei explained the situation well. She knew it must be done. She would exchange herself for her daughter's freedom. This was what her heart compelled her to say. 𝐋𝐤𝐤𝐞 accepted the exchange, so it was done. This was right her heart compelled her to think. The parents would stay, and the child would go. Part 58, Every Story Needs a Close. The girl didn't want to go at first, but her mother assured her that she would find a way to reunite them, that they would just be behind her for now, though Kit should be strong and go. And with a gentle push from her mother, the little girl began walking. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4, turned back round, then walked some more. It wasn't until Kit got a good distance away from her mother and father that she came to a complete stop, still with her body becoming like a strong, familiar tree. The girl stopped to think, for she remembered being in a very similar place before, at a crossroads, stuck between one decision and another. Yes, she thought, another decision would have to be made. A decision had been reached, and though only a moment had passed between then and now, don't be fooled. Kit's decision was not made in haste. She turned round and forward her feet went, back to her parents. The little girl pleaded with them She pranced round and waved arms and used words very compellingly. At the heart of her case, the true core of what she argued was this: that she couldn't go, not as a single nor as a duo, but only as a trio, as a family. Because not only did the daughter need the mother and father, but the mother and father needed the daughter. Kit finished her speech like this: she nearly lost them once. She had nearly lost herself. She had nearly made the wrong decisions because she was lost. But she had managed to stay strong and keep her resolve only because they kept her focused. Kit embraced her parents and told them, "This is the right decision. I'll keep you focused too." Lorelai looked to Bailey, who simply nodded a reply. "Okay, Kit," her mother said, "we'll find a way out together." And sometime later, in a mystical forest, there lived a little girl. This little girl's name was Kit. Kit the kid of which she was never called, lived there very happily with her mother, a fairy princess, and her father, a golem, at least for a while. The end. Kit in the Mystic Forest was written by T.O. Coleman, performed by ''H, with original music remix by Adachi. And as always, we give a very special thanks to our audience for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Next time,